Hello everybody, welcome to our 9th lesson. Today we're going to be working with that dreaded area of English, phrasal verbs. But don't worry, we're going to find an easy way of understanding their meaning, understanding how they work, and learning techniques that will help you definitely internalize them and use them more frequently in your everyday conversations. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Andrea Rial, a teacher of English from Argentina. I've been teaching English for over 25 years. I help pre-intermediate and intermediate adult students speak English more fluently and more confidently. Having said this, let's plunge into our lesson today. First of all, let's get an idea of what a phrasal verb is. Okay, a phrasal verb is a verb, but it is made up of 2 or 3 parts. The first part is the verb itself, and the other is a particle. Why do we use the word particle and not just preposition? Because it might be a preposition, but it might also be an adverb. For example, if you think about the phrasal verb go out, the out there, that word is a preposition, whereas if we think of go away, away is an adverb. So that's why we say that a phrasal verb is made up of a verb and a particle. And then here it also says that one of the characteristics and one of the reasons why phrasal verbs are so difficult for students to understand is that sometimes the meaning of the phrasal verb has nothing to do with the meaning of the verb itself or the combination of the verb itself and the particle. Let's think of look after. Yeah, look after, to take care. Do you know that one? In this case, the meaning of this phrasal verb of look after is not connected to the idea of the verb look itself. So that's why in many cases, phrasal verbs get a little bit complicated, but there's a way in which we can crack them. Okay, the first thing we're going to focus on is on how to use them correctly. We have to understand how phrasal verbs work so as to understand how to use them in a sentence. We're going to focus on whether they are transitive or intransitive, separable or non-separable, but let me tell you what all this is about. Okay, verbs can be classified into 2 categories, not just phrasal verbs, yeah, verbs as a whole. Here the focus is on phrasal verbs, but this is something that you can apply to any verb in English. So again, they can be classified into transitive or intransitive. What is this? Perhaps you remember something from secondary school. When a verb is transitive, it needs an object. So the meaning is incomplete if it's not followed by an object. For example, turn off. If I just say, please turn off, you're going to say, what? What do you want me to turn off? So this is a transitive verb because it needs an object to complete its meaning. Turn off the computer once you finish using it. Then, if we focus on this other phrasal verb, grow up, it is intransitive because the idea is complete in itself, in grow up. Look at the example. What would you like to be when you grow up? It doesn't take an object. Okay, but there's always a but. There are some phrasal verbs that might be either transitive or intransitive depending on the meaning. For instance, come over. In this case, in this example, the one on the left that says a wave of anger came over me, the meaning is that a feeling, or you started experiencing a feeling. So this is transitive because it's to come over somebody. Yeah, a feeling comes over somebody. Whereas in this other example, do you want to come over tonight? The meaning of come over is to visit somebody's house, to go to somebody's house. And in this case, it needs no object. So it is intransitive. So this is the first way of classifying phrasal verbs. Verbs as a whole, but in our class today, we're going to be focusing, as we already know, on phrasal verbs. So once you know whether you need an object or not, there's something else you need to pay attention to if the phrasal verb is transitive. Because transitive phrasal verbs can also be classified into separable and non-separable. If the phrasal verb is separable, It means that you can separate the verb from the particle. Separate those two parts and use the object in between. Remember that the object can be either a noun or a noun phrase, or you might also use an object pronoun. Do you remember object pronouns? Me, you, it, him, her, yeah, those words? Okay, those words that might replace the object of the verb, the noun or the noun phrase. Let's go over this same phrasal verb we mentioned before. Turn off. We said it is transitive, it needs an object, but it's also separable. So look at the different options we can have. We might say, turn off the computer, or we might separate the verb from the particle and we can say, turn the computer off. Or if we have an object pronoun, we might say, turn it off. But there is an exception to this. If you're using an object pronoun, the only possible option you might have is this one, to have the object in between the verb and the particle. You cannot have it by the end of the combination, by the end of the phrasal verb. So you cannot say, turn off it. You can only say, turn it off. That's the only thing you have to pay attention to if the phrasal verb is separable, that you cannot have this last option. If the phrasal verb is transitive, it needs an object, but it is inseparable or non-separable, the thing is that you cannot use the object in between. You cannot separate the verb from the particle. So, for example, it's important to look after your health. Now, you might also use an object pronoun, but if you do, you have to use it after the phrasal verb. It's important to look after it. You cannot use it in between. You cannot say, it's important to look your health after, or it's important to look it after. Is that clear? Okay, so remember these. When a phrasal verb is transitive, it can be either separable or non-separable. If it is separable, you can play with the object, in this case, if it is a noun or a noun phrase, and you have only one possibility if you're using the object pronoun. It has to go in between the verb and the particle. If the phrasal verb is inseparable, you cannot separate the verb from the the verb from the particle, and the object must come at the end of that phrasal verb, right? Okay, very good. So this is what you have to remember regarding the usage, the structure of phrasal verbs. But now let's see how we can understand the meaning of phrasal verbs. We can focus on different things. First of all, we can focus on the particle, because sometimes it's the particle that gives us the idea, the meaning of the phrasal verb itself. Look at these. Prices are going up. So just by focusing on the particle, we know that this idea is that, this sentence means that prices are increasing, they're rising. Look at this other sentence. She got over the flu after a few days rest. Okay, we have the flu, this illness, yes, perhaps she had a temperature, a cough. Okay, and to go over something, yes, if you have that picture in your mind, you might get the idea of this phrasal verb, which is to recover, to overcome an illness. Okay, the other one, please go on with your presentation. Go on, continue with your presentation. This is like go on, move on, carry on. Yes, they all convey the same idea. Or look at this other example, turn the music down. It's too loud. So turn it down. The particle helps you interpret the idea of the phrasal verb. Now, you can also focus on the verb, because sometimes the phrasal verb itself doesn't change, or the meaning doesn't change much from the meaning of the verb itself. We said at the very beginning that sometimes phrasal verbs are difficult because the meaning is completely different from the combination of the words that make up the phrasal verb. But sometimes it's not like that, and the verb itself might be very useful to get the idea. For example, my car broke down. Okay, the verb break is the one that gives you the meaning here. It's not working anymore. The other sentence says, the kids were running about in the garden. Running about, okay, like quickly moving, but the idea is transmitted by the verb itself. Cutting down trees is detrimental for the environment. So again, cutting down. In this case, perhaps it could be a little bit of both the verb and the particle, but it's the verb itself that lets you understand what we are talking about. Or, last but not least, the wild population of koalas is in danger of dying out. Dying out, disappearing by dying. Okay? Excellent. So either focus on the particle, it might give you a clear idea of the meaning of the phrasal verb. Focus on the verb, because sometimes it's quite similar to the verb itself. Not, from the phrasal verb, Or you might also focus on the context to get the idea of what you are talking about or what you're listening to, and grasp the meaning of the phrasal verb. Let's take a look at some examples. They broke up a week ago. They're no longer dating. Okay, so if they are no longer dating and they broke up, this phrasal verb to break up means to stop a relationship. You see how the context can help you get the meaning of a phrasal verb? The other one says, we've run out of milk. We need to go to the supermarket. You have to go to the supermarket, run out of milk. Most probably they need milk. And what's the idea of running out of something? Not having that anymore, yeah? If a phrasal verb is not clear, try to work out the meaning from the context. Okay, what does work out mean here? Okay, the meaning of a phrasal verb, it says it's not clear, so work out the meaning from the context. Okay, so try to understand the meaning from the context, try to get the idea of what it means. So that is to work out, to do this mental activity in order to understand something. Or we can also have the phrasal verb work out in a different context. How many hours a day do you work out at the gym? What does it mean here to work out at the gym? What do you do at the gym? You do exercise, okay? So you can grasp the meaning from the context, okay? So 3 different ways in which you can try to understand a phrasal verb: by focusing on the particle, by focusing on the verb, or by focusing on the context. Then, how can you start learning them? How can you start internalizing them and using them in your everyday conversation? Okay, I'm going to show you different techniques on how to do this. Let's start with the first one. This technique is a bit old-fashioned, let's say. This is the way phrasal verbs used to be taught in the past, but if you find it useful, you might use it. In this case, you might focus on a verb and start learning different combinations, different phrasal verbs with that same verb. For example, in this case, I chose the verb get. Let me tell you why this is a little bit old-fashioned. Because we know that our brain remembers things better by making connections. So the more connections you make, the more memorable something becomes. In this case, if you learn a couple of phrasal verbs because of the verb itself, you're not going to make many connections, just the fact that they share the same verb. I'll show you in the next techniques how you're going to be able to make many more connections by doing or by focusing on other things. But again, if you find this useful, you might very well use it. Look at the examples we have here. We have here with get. It could be get on with. Look at the picture. These 2 friends are chatting, smiling. Apparently they're football fans, yes. And I'm sure they like different football teams because of the color of their t-shirts. And it says, we get on with each other really well. So what's the idea of get on with? To have a good relationship. You can use it in a positive form, in the negative form. We don't get on with each other. That means to have a bad relationship. Okay. Another phrasal verb, get together. Oh, by the way, something I forgot to mention at the very beginning. It was written, I'm sure you must have read that. Phrasal verbs might be made up of 2 parts or 3 parts. 2-part phrasal verbs have a verb and a particle. And three-part phrasal verbs have got a verb and two particles. Okay? All right. The other one, get together. We have to get together to discuss our new project. Okay, what does it mean? Look at this picture, people gathering for a reason. So that's the meaning of to get together, to meet, to gather. Okay, and last but not least, get down to. I need to get down to work or I'll never finish on time. It's like, okay, start working, start doing that to get down to work. Okay? So this is, again, the first technique by focusing on a verb and learning different phrasal verbs with that same verb. Another possibility is to focus on the particle. And why is this going to be more memorable than the previous technique? Because you're going to make more connections through the idea that is transmitted by the particle. Here I chose out, and sometimes this particle might imply stop existing, end, or disappear. So if we focus on these three phrasal verbs, we're going to see that this idea is repeated in each of them. For example, sold out. It says the tickets are sold out. So there are no more tickets. They stopped existing. Or, for example, go out. The power went out after the storm last night. So the power, the electricity, here we have the picture of a power outage. So if the electricity has gone out or if it went out last night, it means that there's no more electricity. It has ended, it has stopped. Same thing here with this other picture. Look at the firemen, and it says the firemen managed to put out the fire quickly. So they managed to stop the fire quickly. Why is this more memorable? Because you have to make some other kind of associations, not just the verb, but focusing on how some phrasal verbs that share the same particle might transmit a similar idea. Okay, another technique. You can also focus on a category, on a topic. For example, here, clothes. And you might learn phrasal verbs connected to that topic. Okay, look at these examples. Put on, yeah, put on your jacket, it's cold outside, or the opposite, to take off your shoes before getting in the house, or this other one here, try on. To try on is just to check if something suits you or fits you. For example, when you go shopping. I always try on clothes before buying them. So all these phrasal verbs are connected to a topic. And we might also have some others like dress up. It's a very formal party. We need to dress up. What does it mean? Okay, to wear smart clothes, to be elegant. There's also another meaning of dress up in connection to clothes. Have you ever heard of a dress up party? A party in which you have to wear a costume, for example, Wonder Woman costume, Superman costume, Spider-Man, a pirate, whatever. So it also has these other meaning. Tucking. Can you get the meaning from the picture? Yeah, to put your clothes inside your trousers, inside your skirt. Okay, so it says here, tucking your shirt into your trousers for the interview, yeah, to look more formal, all right? And last but not least, a phrasal verb that is really clear by both the verb and the particle. It's getting cold outside. Button up your clothes, button up your coat. I was about to say clothes. So button, yes, it gives you that idea of buttons, and button up, so you start kind of closing a jacket, a coat, okay? All right, so this is another possible way of learning phrasal verbs. Why is it so useful? Because of this way in which the brain works when you're learning a language. Remember that the more associations you can make, the better. And it's really useful to get a visual image of something. That's why I tend to include pictures in whatever I'm showing you, in whatever I'm teaching you. Because I think that can make an impact on your brain, and it might help you remember all these concepts and perhaps some of these phrasal verbs much faster and much better. Okay, and last but not least, there is another technique that you can use. You might focus on phrasal verbs and associate them through synonyms or antonyms, like trying to make that kind of connection. Look at the first example. To cut back on something, because this is a transitive phrasal verb, so it needs an object, or cut down on something. Now that I have mentioned these transitive, there's something I forgot to tell you. When phrasal verbs are transitive and they are made up of two particles, they are always inseparable. Okay? Remember that. What does this mean, or what do these two phrasal verbs mean? Okay, they transmit a very similar idea, and they show some kind of reduction. Look at the example. I need to cut back, or I need to cut down on sugar. I eat too many sweet things. So if you need to cut down on something, you have to reduce the amount of consumption, let's say. In this case, this person has decided to eat sweet things only twice a week. That's why this phrasal verb might apply, because instead of eating cakes, sweets, whatever, every day, this person is going to do it only twice a week. So he or she is cutting back on sugar or cutting down on sugar. Another possibility is to focus on opposites, like this pair here, to get on or to get off, in this case, a bus. The example says, be careful when you get off the bus. You might trip over with so many bags. Imagine a person carrying lots of bags, so getting off a bus might be a bit dangerous. Okay. And now, what else can you do to help your brain get in and internalize more and more vocabulary? If you participated in I can't remember if it was my fourth lesson, the one about activating or boosting your active vocabulary, I mentioned this app, Quizlet, because it's really, really useful to create your own flashcards and then practice the vocabulary you want to learn. One of the important things we mentioned that time was that in order to make vocabulary even more memorable, it's really important to connect that vocabulary to yourself by coming up with personal examples, not examples from a dictionary, not examples from this presentation. If you really want to make the vocabulary your own, you have to come up with something that you feel identified with. And I promise you, the vocabulary is going to be much, much more memorable. If you want to have a tutorial on how to use this app, there's one on my Instagram page, Andrea Rial, okay? And I show you how to prepare the flashcards and all the activities you can do with them. Okay, now we know how to learn them, but why are they so difficult then? Well, there are 3 reasons why people might find them so difficult. Because there are many of them, people, I mean students, because this is something kind of natural for native speakers. But for students, they get a little bit complicated because there are many of them. There are many phrasal verbs. I don't know if you have ever seen a dictionary of phrasal verbs, this thick, probably, okay? And another thing is that sometimes one phrasal verb might have multiple meanings. Do you remember the examples we saw with come over? Yeah, a feeling coming over you. I don't know, a feeling of happiness, sadness, anger, whatever. Or the other idea of coming over when you visit somebody's place. Okay, so that also makes phrasal verbs more complicated because you have to learn different possibilities. And some other phrasal verbs have idiomatic meanings. Look at the example I included here, look up to. Okay, have you ever heard that phrasal verb? To look up to somebody means to admire that person. And why is this phrasal verb, or why does it have an idiomatic meaning? Because it doesn't literally imply looking up. It doesn't imply for one person being shorter or taller than the other. It's more metaphoric, yes, like looking up because of admiration, not because of height. So these are the reasons why many students literally hate phrasal verbs. But with all the techniques we have mentioned, I'm sure that after this class, phrasal verbs are going to be at least a bit easier for you. So let's recap what we have said. Remember that it's important to learn the usage of phrasal verbs. So remember that that implies understanding or checking if a phrasal verb is transitive, so if it needs an object, if it's intransitive, so it doesn't need an object, and if it needs an object, is that phrasal verb separable? Can I put the object in between the verb and the particle? Or is it inseparable? And the only possibility is for me to use the object after the phrasal verb. Then we focused on how to get the idea, get the meaning of a phrasal verb. And you can focus, remember, on the particle. Oops, there's a spelling mistake there. My bad. You can focus on the particle, you can focus on the verb, or you might focus on the context to try to grasp the meaning of that phrasal verb. And last but not least, how can you take those phrasal verbs into your range of active vocabulary? Okay, by learning them and focus on the verb. Remember, we said this is not one of the best techniques, but it's a possibility. By focusing on the particle and the fact that some particles, not all the time, but they might transmit and imply and add a certain meaning to the phrasal verb. You can also focus on a topic, for example, clothes. Remember the examples we mentioned. Or you can associate phrasal verbs by synonyms and antonyms. This is not always possible because not every phrasal verb has a synonym, another phrasal verb meaning the same thing, or an antonym. But for some of them, it might also be a technique. And remember that if you really want to internalize all these concepts, it's very useful to use Quizlet. Remember the tutorial is on my Instagram. Okay, so let's say that we have come to the end of today's lesson. As usual, it's a real pleasure to be in contact with you through YouTube. Remember to subscribe to my channel if you feel that these lessons are being useful for you. You can activate the bell to get a notification whenever I upload a video or whenever I go live. And if you want to get weekly tips on how to improve your English and how to become more fluent and more confident, you can follow me on my Instagram page, Andrea Rial, okay? So again, thank you very much. Please leave a comment, yes, if you have found this lesson useful. Take care and see you again next week. Bye-bye.